A life science study guide before the test. So I want to make sure that you are able to define the terms that will be on the test. I will not make you memorize definitions or how to spell terms. I'll either give you the definition and ask you to match it to the term, or I will give you the term and ask you to match it to the definition. So you don't need to exactly word for word be able to determine the definition of any term. Just make sure you understand what it is so you can identify it. And then again, you do not need to know how to spell the term. Just make sure you know how to say it, okay? So our first term is producer, and that's organisms that can make their own food. These are plants, remember, okay? Our second term is consumer, and that's an organism that obtains energy by feeding on other organisms. A decomposer is an organism that breaks down larger chemicals from dead organisms and returns them to the soil, air, or water. Remember, you can pause this video anytime you want, and you can copy answers, change or fix your answers, and then I would advise you to start thinking about, like, if you want to ask a question before the test, highlight something on here as we're going over them, or circle it, or put a star by it so that we can talk about it before you take the test tomorrow. Herbivore is an animal that eats only plants. Carnivore is an animal that eats only other animals or insects. Remember, if something eats an insect, it's a carnivore. An omnivore is an animal that eats both plants and animals. Scavenger is a carnivore, for our purposes, that feeds on the bodies of dead organisms. A food chain is a linear network of links in a food web. Remember, linear means in a line, okay? Food web is the many overlapping food chains in an ecosystem. An energy pyramid is a diagram that shows the amount of energy that moves from one feeding level to another in a food web. Primary consumers are organisms that get their energy directly from plants, and they're always herbivores, okay? Primary consumers are always herbivores. Secondary consumers are organisms that get energy from eating primary consumers. So they're usually carnivores or omnivores, and then they eat the herbivores. Tertiary consumer. A tertiary consumer is a carnivore at the topmost level in a food chain that feeds on other carnivores or secondary consumers. Now, if you have a food web, you can have a couple of tertiary consumers in there because they would be at the top of a food chain, because remember, a food web is overlapping food chains, like more than one food chain, okay? The tertiary consumer is the main, like, predator, okay? Main consumer at the top. An ecosystem is all of the living and non-living things that interact in a particular area, and a biotic factor is the living parts of an ecosystem. Remember, biotic means living, abiotic means not living, right? So we'll start with the next page. An abiotic factor is the non-living parts of an ecosystem. A species is a group of organisms that are physically similar and reproduce with each other to produce fertile offspring. So remember, you have to be able to produce fertile offspring, which can produce more fertile offspring in order to be a species. A population is all the members of one species in a particular area. A community is all the different populations that live together in a particular area. A habitat is the place where an organism lives and provides the things an organism needs to survive. A natural resource is the materials or substances that are found in nature and are necessary or useful to humans. Interdependence means dependence on each other. Biodiversity is the variety of species found on Earth's terrestrial and oceanic ecosystems. That means on Earth and in the water. Biodiversity, a variety of species. Limiting factor is environmental conditions that limit the growth, distribution, or population in one ecosystem. Niche is the function or position of a species within an ecological community. You could say ecological if you want. Symbiotic relationship is organisms live together, resulting in at least one of them benefiting from the other. Parasitism is an interaction that harms one species and benefits the other. This is actually kind of like predator-prey, but this one has a host and a parasite. So that's how you tell the difference between predation and parasitism. Predation harms one and benefits the other. Parasitism does the same thing, but it has a host and a parasite. Commensalism is an interaction that benefits one species and does not affect the other species at all. Mutualism is an interaction where both species benefit each other. Predation is where one species stalks, kills, and eats another, or simply eats another when finding it. And again, that benefits one species and, of course, harms the other one because it kills it. Competition is an interaction that harms both species when they're competing for a limited resource. All right, I'm going to take a peek at the next page. I know there's a lot here. So for this particular page, I asked you to be able to use a food web and answer questions. Let me focus this just a little better, see if it will focus a little bit there. That's a little bit better. All right, so the organisms that can be considered primary producers are the leaves and grass, right? So there's plants. The organisms that can be considered tertiary consumers, remember we talked about this, there can be more than one in a food web, but we have the hawk, okay, and the owl, either one of those or both. The organisms that are producers are the leaves and the grass. Those are plants. The organisms that are primary consumers are the blue jay, the hawk, and the snake. So they're secondary consumers. So here's the producers. Here are the primary consumers. Here are the secondary consumers, okay? Sorry, this is a secondary. So it's like the second consumer, okay? The organisms that are herbivores are the rabbit, the grasshopper, and the caterpillar. Rabbit, grasshopper, caterpillar. Okay, the carnivores are the hawk, because it eats the grasshopper. The hawk, because it eats the rabbit. The blue jay, because it eats the grasshopper. The owl, because it eats the blue jay, and the snake. And the snake is also a carnivore because it eats the caterpillar. It probably would eat baby rabbits too. They're just missing an arrow there, right? So the organisms that are carnivores are the hawk, the blue jay, the owl, the snake. The arrows represent the direction of energy flow. This is super important. The energy flow has to go in the direction of energy, not like what eats what, but where does the energy go? So the energy starts here, usually starts, with the sun, right? And goes to our producers, right? And then it flows from the producers to the consumers, okay? And then ultimately the decomposers break everything down. So here's a really good example of a food chain. What kind of consumers are primary consumers? It's always herbivores. And a food chain with a grass, mouse, snake, hawk, and use the arrows correctly. Your arrows should all be going from the grass to the mouse. Remember, energy from the grass goes to the mouse. Energy from the mouse goes to the snake. Energy from the snake goes to the hawk. We don't use the word like the hawk eats this, the snake eats that. We usually say the energy goes to or from when we're talking about food chains and food webs. Our last page of questions to be prepared for. In an energy pyramid, where is the most energy available? It's at the producer level. Remember, that's at the bottom, okay? So you might say that's at the bottom of the energy pyramid because that's the producer level where the most energy, again, is available. In the energy pyramid, why doesn't all of the energy move from one level to the next? It's because some of the energy is used for life processes. Remember, we talked about this when Mrs. Tomlinson got eaten by Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? All right, and the Tyrannosaurus did not get all the energy. What determines the kinds of living things that will be able to live in an ecosystem? It's the abiotic factors, like what kind of water is available, what kind of sunshine is available, what kind of spaces are available for animals to live in. Like, is there a cave? Is there a mountain? Is there soil? Is there rocks? Like, what is there? What's the temperature? Those are abiotic factors. Number 6, mealworms are not actually worms. What are they? They are the larva stage of the darkling beetle. What are the 4 stages of the life cycle of a mealworm? The egg, mealworm, pupa, adult beetle. You could have these in any order, of course. But if I ask you to draw arrows or whatever, then you make sure that the egg turns into a mealworm, which turns into a pupa, which then turns into an adult beetle, which then can lay eggs. So what is it called when a mealworm sheds its skin? We have not been using this term enough. A lot of you have been telling me, oh, my mealworm had a shed, or I found like a dead skin or whatever. It's called a molt. Say it with me. Molt. Okay. A mosquito bites a human. What kind of symbiotic relationship is this? It's parasitic. The mosquito is the parasite. The human is the host. 2 groundhogs fight over a den. What kind of symbiotic relationship is this? This is competition. They're trying to live in the same space. Okay. Cows eat grass. What kind of symbiotic relationship is this? This is predation. Okay. And number 12, squirrels nest in oak trees. What kind of symbiotic relationship is this? It is commensalism if you're talking about squirrels nesting in the oak trees. The oak trees are not harmed at all. As a matter of fact, they don't even care that the squirrel is there, okay? And the squirrel is benefiting from the oak tree providing a home for them, okay, and food. All right, good luck on the test.